Everybody, welcome. I'm going to get started in just a moment. I wanted to first just introduce myself and share a little bit about the kind of work that I do, and we'll go right into this presentation. So for those that have joined us and that are continuing to come in, welcome. My name is Ganzie. I'm Director of Christian Education for Mount Zion Baptist Church here in Nashville, Tennessee. I've done work in Christian education for quite some time. Thank you, LaKesha. I've done Christian education work for quite some time now, and everything from teaching children to teaching young adults to directing Christian education, so kind of the full gamut. And it's just work that I love to do. So I'll kind of share a little bit about my story and also my theological evolution as well, and how that begins to shape the aim sometimes of those particular programs. So let us begin. So, New wine, old wineskins, rethinking content and carriers of Christian education. That is what I'll be talking about. And I'm using this concept of new wine and old wineskin to talk particularly around content. That is what I'm referring to as wine, and also wineskins in referring to carriers, both teachers and also ministry context. What I hope to share with you today is that we collectively assess who and what is shaping our teachers' theological formation. So when we think about in the church, how many people have access and are out in front doing the actual teaching in our Christian education departments is what is shaping their theological formation. We'll talk about that. We'll examine the theological understandings which enable unjust realities to flourish. So we'll hit on that a little bit, like theologically, how do we think about stuff that allows for oftentimes what we see as many churches and very struggling neighborhoods? How do these things sort of coexist, if you will? And also explore the limits and possibilities of current ministry contexts and reconsidering their theological stances. So where are there possibilities? There's many now, actually. But also, what are those limitations as well? We'll talk about that. And lastly, encourage serious reflection of the aim and impact of Christian education departments have on the embodied experience of our congregants. So all of these things are extremely, extremely important as we start to consider this. So I want to start with this particular text in Mark chapter 2, verse 22. And this is Jesus speaking, and he says, "No one puts new wine into old wineskins, for the wine would burst the wineskins, and the wine and the skins would both be lost. New wine," he says, "calls for new wine skins." So I just want to take a moment and let that settle. New wine calls for new wine skins. And if we're honest with ourselves, we're definitely in a space and we're definitely in a time where that is the imperative, that we have to shift, right? And if we're constantly in tune with God, then we are honestly always sort of doing our own shifts. So it's not like shifting in and of itself is just this new concept. But right now, it is time for new wine. It is time for a new way of thinking and being that is for the liberation and freedom of all of our people, all people. And so that's a part of what we're going to have to start to push at. Is in the Christian education department, there is a ton of content. That is what we disperse out into the congregation. And that does affect the way that people perceive God, how they think about themselves and other people in the world, and therefore how they behave in like manner. If we don't start doing the work of now challenging the content, then we may find ourselves looking like old wineskins. So first, I want to just put that particular phrase into context when Jesus is talking about this new wine and the old wineskins. I want to read just a little bit above so we could get some context going here. Jesus was questioned about fasting in Mark chapter 2, and I'm going to read from verse 18 and get down to our particular text here. It says from the NRSV, "Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting, and people came and said to him," Jesus, "Why do John's disciples fast and the disciples of the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" Jesus said to them, "The wedding guests cannot fast while the bridegroom is with them, can they? As long as they have the bridegroom with them, they cannot fast. The days will come when the bridegroom is taken away from them, and then they will fast on that day." He goes on, "No one sews a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old cloth. Otherwise, the patch pulls away from it and the new from the old, and a worse tear is made. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins and the wine is lost. And so are the skins. But one puts new wine into fresh wineskins." So Jesus here in this particular context is being questioned about something that is traditionally done. Hey, John's disciples are fasting now. The Pharisees, they're fasting now, but why aren't you doing what we are doing? Why aren't you doing what we have always done? So in that particular way, Jesus is challenging tradition. When we're thinking about and reassessing everything in this moment, one big thing that comes up is safety, right? When we're thinking about in light of COVID-19 and how that has drastically affected our gatherings, we're thinking about the ways that safety, we have to, that's an imperative. And what I want us to do is think about how safe is our theology? How theologically safe are we if we preach or teach something that does not bring forth liberation to our people? If we continue to demonize the ideas of mental health, given the fact that so many people will return because people are grieving and they haven't had an opportunity to grieve traditionally together. So we have to be mindful about what can we predict, what is to be expected. And so therefore, in that way, we have to start thinking about theologically, are people safe? And if not, how can we start to make some changes? Okay. So if we want to put the saying into more context, and as I read it farther down, it is something because this text is putting a lot of things like over against one another. You have content and you have context, and they have to merge. And so a part of what we're talking about is compatibility, right? So we have to start thinking about, are we the right ones to do this particular work? And the people that are in place to do the work, what else do we need to be doing as far as training and as far as challenging ourselves in order to move forward? So I want to kind of hear back from you all. I want to pose this question. What does challenging tradition look like? What does challenging tradition look like? And you can drop your comments over here in the chat. But what does challenging tradition look like historically? What does it look like in the church? What does it look like in your particular context? And we're not saying, I don't want to say that tradition in and of itself is wrong, because I don't believe tradition in and of itself is wrong. But traditionalism can be very problematic, is finding one era, one way, and saying that's the way we should always go. So first, understanding your tradition. Absolutely. That is something that's very important, because many people think we just arrived here, yesterday. But these are things we have inherited, right? And there's so much greatness about our traditions. And oftentimes they were founded, in doing a lot of liberated work that we have somehow moved away from. So I think absolutely reclaiming and going back and understanding our history. Thank you, Corey, for that. Question why we operate a certain way. Absolutely. What is the mission? I have seen in a variety of church contexts, churches sometimes look at other churches about, what are we supposed to be doing? And so they're borrowing. I think that can be resourceful in one way and problematic in other ways, because you're not doing the work for your own context. What we are trying to do is imitate a version of success, sometimes that we're being sold. And so in doing so, you will start to forget why you're even doing what you're doing in the first place. So that was really good. Discussing context of scriptures instead of literal teaching. Absolutely. I did with the teachers that I oversee about 65 teachers. And I had an opportunity to do some exercises with them. And it was funny because as I asked them about a particular text that we were, wrestling with, many people begin to do that allegorical work. You can use it with prodigal son. Okay, there's a father there, so that must be God. And there's a son there, so that must be this person, and doing a lot of that. And all of a sudden they can start losing meaning. So helping them to find some literal meaning. So that's really good. What else? Yes. Asking if the tradition is still needed and still serves a purpose today. Absolutely. You have to start to, wrestle with some things. What, in a sense, need to be preserved, and what do we need to dispose of? Considering the current needs over the comforts of the past, absolutely, is so important. We have to start evaluating outside of our doors, right? Not just in that particular context, but around us, right? So, are there literary needs? In church, sometimes we have a lot of cliches, so we don't realize what we're doing. It's like, you need to read your Bible, but what if people have a struggle reading? What if they can't? What if you're in a context where English may not be someone's first language? So those are things that you want to start thinking about. What does my Christian education department look like in this context? And how are we remedying or meeting a need of our community? Absolutely. And I see another one. Challenging tradition is not challenging for the sake of being contrary, but there must be a purpose that aligns with the core values of the faith, which remain the same. Absolutely. Absolutely. Any tradition should support our mission and undergird our theology. If it doesn't, it should be discarded. Absolutely. So those are the sort of things that we want to say when you do that kind of work. As far as challenging tradition, it can be disruptive. It can be disruptive. So it would be silly sometimes for us to just assume that what we find normal now, someone did not have a very difficult time making that normal at some point before. Today, I have been in and out of so many wonderful sessions, and I was in a particular session talking about mental health. And there was so much affirmation from so many people in that particular session, right? And then I thought, 20 years ago, how would that session have went? Would people have even, participated in it? There has been so much work from people that have experienced a lot of pushback that's went into normalizing the fact that mental health experts and people that are skilled in that area are just as called and anointed as anybody that's preaching the word, and they are needed and necessary for us to do the healing work in our congregations. But the first person that may have said that, like, maybe this person doesn't have a demon, maybe it's something else, and these are ways that we can help this person to thrive and to feel a sense of deliverance, if you will. That person likely experienced a lot of pushback at first, and so it takes some time. So sometimes when we talk about challenging tradition, you're talking about combative sort of work, and not combative in the sense that we're trying to take traditions and throw them down. That's not the goal. The goal is being able to say, as one of the participants mentioned, how does it align? How does it align? So he says new wine has to go into new wine skins. You cannot mix certain things and expect to get wonderful results. You cannot continue to preach and teach oppressive theologies and expect to free people, right? So those are the things that we're saying it has to align in some way, shape, or form. All right, let me move to the next one. So who and what is shaping our theological understanding? Now, that is very important because that is really going to say a lot and frame what it is that we're teaching. I'll give you an example. When I started my journey when I first started at seminary, I started at a seminary in Michigan. And it was a predominantly white seminary. And I was the only female in my MDiv program and the only Black female in my MDiv program. And it was a very hostile environment. The first time I heard about liberation theology was in the context of it being a type of distortion of the gospel. Okay. So if you are coming to knowledge of certain things and it is being taught to you in a way that says, hey, if you come across this, if you come across people, saying that LGBTQ communities should have rights, that women are called to preach and teach. If you come across that, just be mindful that that is not the gospel. Okay. And therefore, when someone comes with that, what would I do? I'm going to start to push back on it if I'm not careful, right? The problem, of course, the reason that didn't work is because my Black lived experience simply did not allow for me to just go ahead and acquiesce to something that doesn't align with my experience, right? But many people have been taught that these are deterrents, and therefore that becomes a baseline. So if I come into your congregation and I'm saying, Black Lives Matter or all lives matter, that is where you're getting some of the pushback. And so we have to say that theologically, what we teach in our content, what we center, who we center, it matters. Like you will learn about all of the philosophers when you're doing those programs. That it's not a guarantee unless there's a specified type of program that you're going to learn about Black theologians. So here it is. I'm situated in a large Black congregation, and I'm asking many of the teachers, who do you know? Who's the Black theologian that you have on your bookshelf that you read regularly? And less than 10%. And so that's alarming, right? And the thing is, for many people who have been blessed to come up in different traditions or churches that have done so much work around keeping them informed and lifting them up in, who they are as people, that's not the case all the time for every congregation. So therefore, we had to do some work. And so I'll share with you really quick about a particular thing that I did. And I would definitely encourage those, if you're doing Christian education work, or if you're a pastor or whatever the case may be, if you're just a person that studies, for the sake of studying so that you can grow in your faith, is to do this. So the first thing, I did a case study with my particular group, and we did a study inventory exercise. And again, it was getting around, who are you, who's shaping your theology? So the first thing was, whose voices are you centering? So we went through, of the religious books that you have, how many of your books are written by Black and Brown theologians? How many of your books are written by Native American people? How many of your books, what voices are you going to send are written by people who don't maybe worship like you, maybe Muslim people who still can speak to our particular tradition, or people who, again, are normally excluded a lot of times in the church. So those that are of the LGBTQ community, right? How many books are written by that you are studying from. The second thing was, whose experiences are you centering? Okay, so with that, again, how many of your books are written by women? That was a good question, because you have a lot of people who get on these trendy, they kind of get on the boat late. And so they're like, yeah, I do believe that women should be in ministry. I do believe that women are called to preach and teach. But if you don't sit under women leadership, then all of a sudden you're going to have some sort of clash. So it's one thing to affirm that. It's another thing to actually allow that person or those experiences to influence and shape how you think about different things. And it is very helpful, because I have a particular limitation with what I do and know in the world. And it takes for me to connect with my neighbor. It takes for me to connect with brothers and sisters of other faiths, brothers and sisters just in other cultures, to give me more perspective so that I can learn of God more, that I can learn of other people more, and therefore I can be better in the world. Whose worldviews are you centering? Right? So I said, of the particular authors that you have, do you know of their denominational affiliation? This is not to say one denomination is better than others. That's not the goal. But it's also to say that you can maybe understand why they may write the way they write, or understand things in a particular way. They may lean more around certain ideals based off of what is shaping them, their tradition. And then the last piece is, what issue topics are you centering? So I say, if you could categorize your books, how would you categorize them? And I mean, this was a big exercise, but are they relationship books, right? Are they encouragement books? Are they devotionals? Are they testimonials? Do you read anything that actually talks and informs you about the social justice movements? Do you read anything that informs you about the issues around incarceration or immigration? What issues are you centering? So if your teachers are informed primarily by people who do not live their experiences, and if they're informed primarily through reading stuff that centers just relationships, or centers just devotionals, or hey, we want you to be happy, then that is going to absolutely affect what they teach and how they teach. Okay. So first, any questions? Any questions? Let me pause really quick. Any questions? Any comments? Yeah. All right, cool. So we'll keep pushing. So I want to talk about now the significance of Christian education, and particularly the goal or the missions of those particular departments. So we like to use the word discipleship a lot, right? And I love it. I'm with it. One thing that does, though, is you have to think about what are people's understanding of discipleship and disciples. And so most people, if you ask them, they'll just say a disciple is a follower of Christ, right? And they're not wrong. That is a follower of Christ. And so I was doing a little bit of reading, and the English word disciple designates a follower or a student. So as seen like in the New Testament, disciple is also a way to refer to a believer, right? But over time, they're used almost synonymously to speak about Christians. So Christians sort of try to take that word and, monopolize it, if you will. Rarely will you see this word appear in the Old Testament, the word disciple. And if I'm not mistaken, it will show up, I believe, 3 times as a translation for the Hebrew words Talmud and Limudet. Yet there is compelling evidence that the nature of the prophetic ministry and writings, the role of the scribes, and even the wisdom tradition, such as Proverbs and wise counselors present throughout the Old Testament, for the existence of this unique master-disciple relationship in the social structure of Israel. And this is because all that I've mentioned, the prophetic, the law, wisdom, those endeavors to communicate the revelation of Yahweh. So that is a part of the endeavor, is to communicate the revelation of Yahweh. Thus, a disciple should function as both a revealer of God's word to the world and a witness of God's way in the world, a revealer and a witness. In the New Testament, that's another story, the way that we think about disciples, because our understanding centers around the 12 followers of Jesus. And as a result, we usually think of them, like I said before, as a follower. In the New Testament, disciple is a translation of the Greek word mathetes, which actually means a learner. And so therefore, to be a disciple is to be a lifelong learner. So a part of our understandings, of course, is like, when you're a lifelong learner, you don't just conclude on yourself like, hey, this is what I know, that just never changes. Sometimes it's not a matter of a change as it is an expansion of what you know. And so we just want to be open to the ways in which God constantly expands different things to us, give us different ways of seeing and understanding. And that's the blessing of having the community of empowered believers to constantly speak and share, and therefore we grow and we learn. And so when you think of yourself as a learner as opposed to a follower, right? Learners allow themselves to be curious. They allow themselves to observe and to ask questions. You know, I grew up missionary Baptist, and so, you don't question God. But my grandmother, being the smooth Sunday school teacher she would at least try to, her own resistance, say, well, you may not question God, but you can certainly ask a lot of questions. And therefore, I became that person asking questions. But a learner is not a subservient person. They're not spiritually inferior to anyone else. So a learner doesn't just say, hey, whatever this person says, I'm going to believe it. I'm not going to ask any questions. And that's that. A learner is okay with sometimes sitting and wrestling with God. And that's okay. And so you don't want to conclude on yourselves. And that is how people become sort of stuck in their ways. And so we won't get stuck in our ways because we are lifelong learners. We're disciples. Now, if you choose and you say, I still like the idea of following as a particular way of understanding discipleship, I'm down with it. Then I would just challenge and say, understand yourself then as a follower or one that comes after, if you will, someone that does succession. So we are following in the ways of God. That is why Jesus says, hey, when I'm out of here, you're going to do greater works, right? He's saying what I did, if you think this was good, let me tell you, when my people get empowered, when they really start getting this word within them, they're going to end up doing greater works. And so I want to empower you, you have to know that you are here to do greater things. And that's because you follow in the succession of one who had done some amazing stuff in the tradition of Jesus. And so it's a build. You're here to do greater works, right? So the significance of the Christian education role, what it is that department, if you will, that area does is in the ideas of knowing, doing, and being. That is what we concern ourselves with: knowing, doing, and being. And so when you think about it being in that way, it's holistic. Okay. So it shouldn't just be like, the goal is for me to indoctrinate you. That's not the goal. If anything, we're here to help people think, right? You're helping people to think critically. You're helping people to take ownership of the stuff that they put out in the world, to not say, the Bible said it, so if you mad at it, you got to deal with God. No, you are the interpreter, and therefore you have to have accountability to what you interpret and put out in the world. So it's saying, hey, if you don't like that kind of accountability, hey, then you want to rethink if this is an area that you want to get involved in, because it's so important what we're putting out and what we're disseminating into the culture. So it's holistic. Okay, we invite people into that critical thinking space. We are those that dispense the rhetoric of freedom and liberation. Okay, that is what the word is. The word is free. The word liberates us. And so therefore, we have to say theologically, is it death dealing the things that I say, or is it life giving? Okay. If I say certain things, does it turn around and yield an action from a person that goes out and do harmful things to people? Do they look down on folks? Do we feel like we're superior to other people? Those sort of things, that comes from the stuff that we say. That comes from the things that we call ourselves interpreting and saying, hey, the Bible said it, I didn't say it. Those sort of things. It's like, no, that is a part of what we're rethinking. And that is a part of what we're going to commit ourselves to, is being accountable to the stuff that we say in the world, because guess what? We will have to give an account one day. Right. And I want to be found with God saying, you did the work, you were careful. As you learned when you went along the way, you made changes. OK, so those are the things that we want to think about. When we're thinking about the knowing, that is the theological reflective piece and integration. OK, so when we're talking about Christian education, the knowing piece of Christian education, theologically, how we are just wrestling through different things. Expand your mind. Expand your mind. Find different people that are interested in endeavoring, and start a little book club or something. So as Christian education teachers, I can't stop. I have not, found certain practices or my favorite theologians and say, okay, I'm done. Cool. There's nobody else I can listen to. Oh no, like God is always raising up new people and allowing us to interact in such ways with new different ways of being, and that will help us to be better in the world. So that I have to be very open to. I study all types of stuff. I study other religions. I study other cultures. I don't study to, again, make myself sort of superior to anybody, but we do it for the sake of what? Love, so that I can be a good neighbor to somebody, that I can learn to be more respectful and more aware of their experience in the world as well. Now, the doing of ministry, that's where we're talking about the competencies and the skills, right? A part of our Christian education departments, a part of that curriculum has to be very practical. So it can't just be sit down, let me tell you something. Did you get it? Okay, good. We're good to go. We've done our work. No, it also has to be opportunities that put people into the world to dabble, if you will, a little bit in their vocational exploration, especially young folks, right? To understand, what am I here to do? Because that's what a lot of people are grappling with. I want to share a story. There was a particular time I was working doing Christian education work with a particular church, and a congregant reached out to me and said, hey, I have bipolar disorder. Do I have spiritual gifts? Do I have spiritual gifts? Would God endow me with something like that? And of course, I affirmed this person. And I said, what spiritual gift do you believe you have? And they said, I believe that I have the gift of the prophetic. And I know many of you, like, of course, they, that sort of thing. Everyone does, right? But we start to unpack that. And again, as I began to divest from a very Eurocentric theology, which we all need to do, that means that you have to sometimes go back to your basic understandings and sort of reread and reinterpret. Not to say the prophetic, as I grew up, looked like someone, saying, like in whispered voice and getting very close and saying, like, woman of God, doing something like this, and maybe speaking something about my future, right? And I go into a frenzy. But it's until I begin to get into, Black liberation works that I begin to learn a little bit more about what the prophetic really was, and how the prophets spoke to the social structure of Israel, how the prophets differ from priests in that they do not just try to acclimate if you were assimilate to different cultures, but they're the ones that can go and speak truth to power, right? In any setting. And therefore, I was wondering, does she have a leaning to social issues in my mind? And as she began to say, I think that that's where I'm gifted at. I said, what kind of work do you do? And she says, I do work with children, helping them get out of abusive situations. I work in social work. Ah, of course you do. Of course you do, because you have the prophetic gifts. So these are just an example of the ways that you sometimes have to go back and rethink the things that we're doing and while we're doing them and affirming the way those gifts show up. And sometimes that may not happen if you go into a store and pick up a curriculum and say, I'm gonna buy it because it's on sale and they're talking some about spiritual gifts. And I think that the young folks is gonna like it. We really have to take serious what it is that we're teaching them and how that's gonna help them continue to grow into the world outside of our church. And of course, that leads right into being the habits, the practices related to self-awareness, the embodied self, the well-being, and the healing relationships that people play out, right? So those are the significance of Christian education and why it's so important that we really do get it right in this moment. Let me keep going. So I want to shift a little bit because I want to talk about the ways that our theological understanding sometimes enable unjust realities. And the good Reverend William H. Lamar the fourth mentioned this in a recent article that he did around, he says, it's not just COVID killing us, it's bad theology. Y'all should check it out. He makes this quote in there: political systems require a theological system. Political systems require a theological system. Absolutely, Alexis, great article. That is so important to understand the ways that theology functions over against how policies are enacted, the governing of ourselves and of our nation, of our communities. We all have experienced it where we need to get people more, say, civically engaged. And people say, I don't have to worry about voting. God is in control. And to that, I tell people, yes, but we are responsible for who's in charge. And therefore, you have to get out there and you have to be engaged socially in the well-being of other folks, right? So that comes from a theological understanding. That doesn't just come from, hey, don't vote. It really does come from the idea that, oh, if God is simply providential and just in control, then I don't really have to do anything because, God's going to take care of it anyway, right? That right there puts so much onus on God that removes us as agents that he has empowered in the world. And so we're just sitting back like, God is going to do it. I would help you, but God is going to do it. Yeah, man, I know that you need some assistance with XYZ, and but I'm praying for you. I'm praying for you. We can no longer dumb down what God has empowered us to do, right? And I'm like, good Lord, it wasn't enough for Jesus to die. He got to die, and now he got to come back and do the work we should be doing and do this and the other. Y'all, no more. As we're rethinking church, we're also saying, God, I need to really get on the purpose that you called me to do, the work that we have to do in the world. As our wonderful, beloved, the late Katie Cannon mentioned, she says, we must do the work that our soul must have, right? That's it. That's the stuff that we have to do. And so our theologies help us to do that work. And it's to do it in such a way where we can begin to remedy some of the things that we're seeing happen in our communities and our neighborhoods in the world. When you see food deserts, when you see poverty, when you see homelessness, when you see sex trafficking, those are things that we have been called to address in the world, okay? And so the word being incarnate in me pushes me out into the world to do those greater works that Jesus was talking about. And so I just wanted to harp on that for a little bit and move on. But I want you all to understand again why challenging sometimes your theological assumptions is so important, because you have to say, does my theology stifle me? Like, I don't really feel the need really to do much other than go to church or do this or do that, right? I don't really see the ways that my spiritual gifts turns into vocational pursuits and how I get certain things done in the world. Those are things that we have to begin to interrogate. New wine calls for new wineskins. That's what it is. As teachers, we have to be dedicated to learning. As people who are carriers of our traditions, we have to be dedicated to those processes of learning and challenging our own understandings. We have to be. In this sort of atmosphere where we are constantly trying to affirm ourselves and rallying cries of Black Lives Matter, my life matter, it is so frustrating when you are talking to someone saying, my experience is like this and it hurts and it is unjust and it is not fair, and they respond in ways that absolutely undermine what you just said. With that in mind, you have to be able to say, when there are those in our congregations that say, in this space, I love it here, but I'm discriminated against. I can give to your church, but I can't experience full membership of your church. You won't marry me here, right? So things of that nature. When people begin to share with you that they're feeling like crushed, at least take a moment to hear a person out and assume that they may be right. Because we know, as people who has experienced some of the worst types of discriminations, what that feels like. And therefore, when other people are telling us, hey, guys, you may come off as extremely judgmental, I don't think you all are being as mindful as you need to our particular, situations and the issues that we're facing. We need to listen. We have to listen. We shouldn't listen hostilely. We shouldn't listen in ways where I'm just listening to respond, right? But we should listen in ways that says, God, I know that as I listen, you're about to give me guidance for how I need to change and move forward. Not just respond, but some of your response doesn't even need talking. It just needs action, right? Having a good theological understanding makes you go back into your church policies and say, how are we ordaining people? How do we pay people, right? Things of that nature, okay? So as we're rethinking, we've got to get this theology piece on point, because it really does affect our people. And we want everybody to thrive. And the way that they're going to thrive is if we have a theology of freedom and liberation. All right. So I'm going to speed it up a little bit. Excuse me. So limits of our current ministry context. Some of that looks like leadership, funding, resources. Our theological commitments sometimes can be limiting. Innovation. Sometimes we just don't have a group that may be as innovative. Do you have too many people around you that are too like-minded? They're like the same mind, right? You need some diversity of expertise, so kind of roll together. And traditionalism, again, the tradition in and of itself, that may be just fine. But again, the practice of traditionalism, simply saying, hey, this place and time work, let's just stick here, we can move no further, that becomes problematic. So we're identifying that these are some of the current limits that we're finding in our ministry context. This is what we mean by these wineskins, right? Leadership, is the leadership receptive? Right? Is the leadership, how well do they do with integrating new ideas? So once we've learned, hey, I think we may be doing something that could be harmful, or I think we're doing something that could be discriminatory, then do you change? Do you make the changes? How, quick? When was the last time your congregation has wrestled with something theologically, right? So you have to think about those things. Funding, of course, is always never necessarily been on our side, but we are a resourceful people. And let me tell you, this is a time for churches not to just be in their own silos, but we've got to start reaching out to one another and forming coalitions where we can start getting more work done through resources and also theological commitments as well. Possibilities. What possibilities of current ministry exist? I don't know who this is for, but it's time for the emergence of new leaders as well. And it's your time. It is your time. It is time for you to step out of the box of just being supporting roles and say, God has equipped me. God keeps giving me these things, whether it's ideas or ways or visions for, prophetic imaginations for how our communities can thrive and flourish, right? We need you to do what you do, the way you do it at that, right? So these are some of the possibilities that beset us. That's why sometimes you are not as comfortable where you are, right? Because God is like, no, he's stepping you. It's time for you to do it, right? Reimagining discipleship. That's another area, right? A lot of times our discipleship has very much so centered around a very evangelical idea, right? So the goals is like mission, or the goals is just learn the Bible or certain things like that, right? Okay, I understand it. I'm down with it. It's not bad. But we also have to say, what is the actual goal? Is the goal conversion or transformation, right? Is the goal that, hey, just learn the Bible and that's all you need to know and we've done our job? Is it just that? Or is it putting that into conversation? Right. So we have to figure out what is the goal of discipleship. When and where Christian education happens, y'all, the sky's the limit at this point, right? So it's not just happening just, Sunday morning at 8:30 in this particular classroom, right? It can happen in a variety of different ways at a variety of different times, right? So those are some wonderful possibilities that was set. A survey and educational needs. Again, not just in biblical knowledge, but what else do we need? Is it literacy programs? Whatever the case may be, partner up with different groups. Say, hey, my church can be a locale for us to do this work. And new visions for facility use as well. Some people, I know people don't want to hear this, but everybody may not be coming back to our particular churches. That's going to happen. It's going to happen whether we like it or not, right? So we have to say, God, only you would just sort of dump the church out, lead the buildings there and tell us, you can't go back in the church. You're going to learn how to be the church without a building, right? And that's a part of what we're doing, right? So with that, we have to say, but those buildings are still there. What then? How can we reimagine what we could use them for when the time comes, when it's safe, right? So those are other spaces that we can start to do some reimagining in as well. Partnerships, I'm going to say this and I'm going to begin to wrap up. It's going to be so important, y'all, that we come together, that we work together, build ministry networks, have sister and brother churches all across the aisle, and may not just be in your faith tradition either. That's what we mean by we are going to have to do this thing together. It's going to have to be time out for the competitiveness, all of that. We got to come together so we could get the work done. Partner with local organizations to do some of this work. And as far as educational needs too, we're not experts at everything, right? There's certain things that I need my congregation to be informed about, but I'm not an expert in it. That's okay. I can find other experts and pull them in, and they can also share those platforms. So look, we're not here to hog the mic, right? It's time to pass the mic to people that are better fit to talk about different issues, right? So experts, consultants, and seminaries and divinity schools. I don't know all of the areas that they may be thinking about, but when it comes to the way that the pew has to be educated, think about and maybe pitch to different of your local seminaries and divinity schools in ways that you and them and your church can partner. Or it may not just be your church, y'all. It may just be your ministry where God has envisioned for you to go and things for you to do. But I just say, try it and see what happens. But partnerships are going to be big for us. So today we looked at assessing who and what is shaping our teachers' theological formation. Who are they listening to? What are they watching, right? Examining the theological understandings which enable unjust realities to flourish. Do you have a sort of lazy theological understanding of the work that you must do in the world? If so, we have to challenge that. And if you see people around you like that, you have to challenge it. Exploring the limits and possibilities of current ministry context and reconsidering their theological stances. It's so important, y'all, but we're already doing that work. And lastly, encouraging serious reflection of the main aims and impact of our Christian education departments on the embodied experiences of our congregation, right? Thank you guys first for attending this presentation. I'm so grateful for your time. I know that we're about to shift out, but last thing, I would love to connect with you. This is my site. I have it up on the screen, just jessicaganzie.com. And I would love to do a discovery call with you. This is a way that I connect with other churches, and we can sit down if there's areas that you feel like you may be struggling in as far as, content for your Christian education departments, course development, whatever the case may be. Sometimes you need to just kind of vent a little bit about, finding where do we go from here. I would love to connect with you, and I would love to be a partner with you and your ministry as we all come together and move forward. Other than that, I am all set. And again, I thank you guys. If there's any questions or concerns, I'm checking out the chat now. And so I would love to hear back from you all. Good. Thank you all. Thank you. Oh, thank you, Corey. Bless you. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you. All right. Oh, good. Our sisters and brothers are all over. Good to have you and see you. Oh, yeah. Sharing some of the books. Definitely check out Liberating Black Church History. That's one. Jesus and the Disinherited by Howard Thurman. Liberating Black Church History by Dr. Juan Floyd Thomas. Any of the Floyd Thomases are pretty dope. Yes, Jesus and the Disinherited by Howard Thurman. That can start to help you with your Christology. Checking out theologians like James Cone, Kelly Brown Douglas, folks that are doing ethics work, Stacey Floyd Thomas. I'm trying to think who else. There's so many of us. It's not like a few. It's so many. I can pull it up really quick. Oh, I can share it. Let's network, and I would love to just share some more of those particular theologians and works with you all. But those are just a few we can start off. Good. Katie Cannon. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Will change your life. Will change your life. Yes. Good. Thank you all. Thank you all for sharing too. And if there's others on here, because if there's others, definitely put them in there. Absolutely. Tracy West. All right. Yes. Renita Weems. Listen. Yes. Y'all can keep adding them too. These are great. These are the folks that you want to start centering in your work to really help you rethink how we're thinking about God, ourselves, and one another. This is so good. Good. The late King Hope Felder, Dr. Will Gaffney. Oh my goodness. Woman is Midrash. Come on. Yes. Absolutely. Dr. Mitzi Smith is another New Testament scholar. Does amazing work. Good. Good. Thank you all. Dr. Missy Smith is, oh my goodness, you cannot miss Friday. You don't want to miss any of these days. The lineup is just dynamic. Dr. Missy Smith is amazing. He does some amazing work. Dr. Stephen J. Ray, good. Yes. Yes, my dean, Emily Towns, and Emily Towns at Vanderbilt. Don't tell her. I'm just having sort of a block right now for some of my folk. But yes, absolutely. There's so many. Do that work. On my website, I actually have a spot where I have, I basically make suggestions every month for different books that you can read and check out. So if you go to the website, you can sign up. We'd love to have you on, and you can just check out from month to month different reading suggestions that I offer as well. Good. Thank you all so very much. I'm so grateful for you. LaKesha, thank you so much for your help and for this invitation. It's been wonderful. Thank you all.